Hi, I'm Elle Engels, and welcome to Improving Athletic Performance, a webinar that I'm giving this evening. If you're listening in live, stay on at the end. After I shut off the recording, I'll go ahead and put my webcam up and we can have some question and answer live here on the air. If you are receiving this in recorded version, welcome to you as well. Improving athletic performance. This is one of my favorite topics. I have been coaching athletes since I was 17 and loving every moment of it when I'm with them, on and off over the years, not continuously, and mostly track athletes. However, with my performance coaching, I have worked with a variety of athletes and had an incredible amount of success sharing with them my pressure free performance techniques that allow them to perform at a higher level than many of them ever dreamed possible. First, I thought I'd just tell a little bit about myself, just a little, because I like to get right into the meat of things here. I am a performance coach and a stress management coach. I don't just work with athletes, I work with people from age 12 to 90. Work with a lot of CEOs and people in the corporate world, but also stay at home mothers, grandmothers, just really anyone who has an issue with stress, anxiety, or anger and would like some simple tools to start to reverse out some of those negative patterns. My expertise comes from performance. I'm not a therapist and I'm not a psychologist. If I'm working with a client and see that they have a need in that area, then I usually help them secure someone in their life to move into that direction. What I am is a performance coach. My background is all in performing, musically and athletically. I have a Bachelor of Musical Arts, a Master of Music, and an MBA from the University of Michigan. Actually got to be in some classes with Bo Schembechler, the most amazing football coach in Michigan history, though Brady Oak is certainly trying to get there too. But Bo Schembechler was an institution all in one man, and it was a fabulous experience to actually get to hear him speak and share his expertise as a coach with us. I was a phys ed major for a year, but then moved full time into the music department at Michigan. I was the first woman ever accepted into the orchestral conducting program there. So broke a glass ceiling in 1986, and since there have been many women who've gone through that program. But jumped over to the business school too, which made my bank president father very happy to get a practical degree, and got my MBA at the same time that I got my Master of Music. In high school, I did a variety of sports. I was co-captain of our cross country team. It's a large high school in New Hampshire, Concord High School. Distance leader for our track team, co-captain of the JV basketball team, and I was also a hockey cheerleader. I also worked out with the ski team one year because we had no snow in New Hampshire, so we did some road races as a ski team, which was kind of interesting. In college, my freshman year, I was recruited to row. And 3 weeks after being a novice, I won a spot in the varsity boat and rowed crew for 3 years. Fabulous experience. In '83, our crew was a silver medalist at the head of the Charles, which was just absolutely amazing experience. And over the years, I've been a track coach both at the high school and the middle school level. So that's just a little background about me. I founded Pressure Free Living in 2010, and it's my life's mission. It's my life's mission to share with you some of these concepts tonight. It's really kind of an overview and a little introduction into what I do with Pressure Free Performance. And first, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of my clients' successes. Very early on, one of my first clients was a cross country runner, a young runner, and he had set a goal for his season. After working through my course with me, he actually surpassed his goal by 2 full minutes, which just blew his mind. He kept setting goals a little bit higher, but never did he dream that he would actually take 2 full minutes off of his time. Another cross country runner this past season in 2012 in the fall. He came to me. His times were getting a little slower, and he was hoping for some nice college scholarships, and it wasn't happening. And so I got in touch with him, and we began our sessions. After our first session together, he took 46 seconds off his all-time PR. And that was, I see we have some more people joining us here. So welcome, Juliana. I'm hoping you can hear us just fine here. I think I'll put on chat for a sec so I can make sure that you can. Juliana, can you type a message in here and let me know that you can hear me okay? Um, and just so that you know, stay on at the end of I'm recording this session. If you stay on at the end, I'm going to put up my webcam and we can have some questions and answers. So welcome. Let's see. I'm going to unmute you for a minute. Can you hear me, Juliana? I can hear you now.
And we're gonna play cat one.
I'm going to go ahead and mute you, okay? But I can hear. I just want to make sure you're on, and you are.
Yes, I'm on.
Wonderful. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. So here we are. I'm going to talk right now about I'm going to go back here and talk a little bit about some of my clients' successes. I'm recording this, and so at the end, Juliana, stay on, and we're going to have some live question and answer. I'll put my webcam up, and we can talk a little bit. This is a little introduction into what pressure-free living is all about, especially pressure-free performance for athletes. I was just talking about this second runner I have here on my slide. I had a cross-country runner this year who took 46 seconds off his all-time PR after just one session with me. The next session, we worked together, and the following meet, he took another 18 seconds off to win his league championship, and the next closest runner was a whole minute behind him. All in all, he ended up sixth at AAU Nationals, gained a couple points on his ACT because we got rid of some test anxiety. And then during spring track, his goal was to get on the podium at the state meet for the 1600. And when he went to regionals, he actually competed in the 800, 1600, and 3200 and made it to states in all three events. When he got to states, again, 1600 was everything, and he was just going to pour his heart out. And if he had nothing left, he wouldn't race in the other two events. So he did the 1600 and came in fourth, got on the podium, felt good about the race, and felt that he was completely spent. And it was fascinating because I watched him. I was with his folks and his coach up in the bleachers, and he came up and sat with us, and he definitely was done. He wasn't going to run anymore. Told his coach and his dad, "Nope, that's it." And I watched him for a few more minutes, and I thought, I just kind of felt like he still had something in him. So I sat next to him and I talked to him for a little bit, and I used some of the tools that I use to free up our bodies for better performance. And then I went back to where I was sitting, and a couple minutes later, he turned around and stopped. And it was second call for the 3200, and he said, "I'm going to go run this race, and I'm just running it for fun." Just totally for fun. And he was seated 22nd for that particular race, and he came in ninth. So he was one person away from making it on the podium in that race as well. Fabulous race for him, especially thinking that he couldn't do any more that day. I had a baseball player who lowered his ERA all the way down to 1.15 for his senior year. Just by being so incredibly focused and doing a lot of goal work with me to smooth everything out and never let anything rattle him. So basically, one runner per game scored on him, which was pretty amazing. I had another hockey player, a high school aged hockey player, who had an injury, and basically trainer said, "You're going to be off the ice for 6 weeks. It's going to take at least 6 to 8 weeks." And by using my method to keep himself calm all day long, day after day, and keep his immune system up and his inflammatory response up, his injury healed in half the time. It was about 3.5 weeks, and he was back on the ice, which I thought was really pretty amazing. So these are just some of the things that clients have experienced with me. And now we're going to get right into athletic performance. And I have this little slide here about what hurts athletic performance, what takes us out of our game. I like to say that my coaching helps athletes find the sweet spot, that in the zone feeling throughout all of their activities, whether it's on the court, on the field, or in their day as well. So things that take us out of our game are poor nutrition, not enough sleep and rest, any sort of nervousness or anxiety, lack of training, of course, injuries. Injuries can really be um, blowing to us, not just physically, but also can really affect us mentally. It's not fun to be injured, and it can cause people to have all sorts of different feelings, even get angry about the fact that they're injured and not able to train and not able to perform. Lowered immune system can really affect our performance, whether we're sick. Equipment problems, negative self-talk, fear, and I'm sure you can think of many more things that hurt your athletic performance, things that take us out of our game on a daily basis, or especially when we're training or performing. The thing I'm going to talk about the most tonight is something called the fight or flight stress response. What I have found and what I've created through pressure-free living and pressure-free performance is a way to stop the triggering of the fight or flight stress response, which can cause many of those effects that take us out of our game. If we go back thousands of years, our bodies were under attack. Human bodies were under attack quite frequently by saber-toothed tigers, wild creatures, fire, other tribes, all these things that would attack us. And so our body has this natural mechanism called the fight or flight stress response to protect us from a true physical threat. However, in the 21st century, we're treating all sorts of little annoyances and situations, mostly psychological and sociological situations, as if we're under attack when we really aren't. I've boiled it down to 4 emotions, and in my full course, I go really in depth into these emotions. And here I'm just going to share them briefly with you. Whenever we feel angry, anxious, annoyed, or ashamed, those emotions are the ones that start to get our heart rate rising and some tension build in us to the point where we will trigger the fight or flight stress response. And it can happen in really simple situations. For example, I have a really old door. I live in a 1929 old house here in Battle Creek, Michigan. And when I go to get into my house, I have to fiddle with the door with the key because my house has settled so much over the years. And it's usually just on humid days, but I can never predict it. And I had no idea until I figured all this out in 2010 that just that simple situation was causing me to trigger the fight or flight stress response and release nasty stress hormones. There's another A that I talk about in private with clients, and that's whether or not clients have been verbally or physically abused or are in relationships that are verbally or physically abusing or abusive. And I have some clients for whom their work situation is rather abusive. They may have someone that they work with who speaks to them in a way that really causes them a great deal of anxiety. So it can be very subtle as well as overt, this feeling that we're under attack or under threat. And so in the 21st century, these are the things that are causing us to trigger the fight or flight stress response when we really don't need to. So with pressure-free living, what I aim to help people experience is a day full of these kinds of emotions. So I joke in my course that you don't want to get A's with me. You actually want to get C's, and here are some E's. So calm, confident, courageous, committed, energetic, exhilarated. When I was first creating my method and sharing it with my eldest son, he said, "You know, Mom, I feel calm and exhilarated all day long at the same time," which seems kind of strange. One of my friends just coined a new word for me. She says, "Call it calm-exhilarated." And that's really what it feels like. You're calm because you haven't released those hormones. And at the same time, you have all this energy because what I'll share with you this evening is that stress hormones really debilitate our health and cause us to underperform as athletes. So I'm going to share briefly what happens when we feel this emotion and trigger the fight or flight stress response. When we feel one of those emotions, our heart rate starts to rise. And I just read an article this week that says that even in warm weather, when the temperature gets really hot, our heart rate rises as well. So it's much easier to trigger fight or flight when you're in a hotter climate, which explains why there's so much more tension and anger going on in the summer months. Or in the equatorial zone, there's so much more violence all across our world in the equatorial zone. And one of the reasons is it doesn't take so as much as it does in northern climes to trigger fight or flight. So these emotions, or in this case temperature too, cause the heart rate to rise. That sends a signal to the adrenal gland to release what are called catecholamine hormones. The chief catecholamine hormone is adrenaline. So for the purposes of my course and for this webinar, I'll refer to these hormones as adrenaline, although it is this little cocktail of different substances that create different effects in our body. Many of these effects you've experienced, and each person is so uniquely different, which is why I kept expanding and building my course. My full course is actually 6 sessions with 41 different tools to help people because I kept experiencing new people who needed a different spin on things to help them stop releasing these stress hormones. But adrenaline has a great purpose. When it releases out of the center of those adrenal glands, it's going to go out through the bloodstream to wick fat and glucose and bring it to the center of the body so we have a massive amount of energy to super fight or flee very fast. But for the most part, when we trigger today in the 21st century, we're not going anywhere. I have athletes who will trigger fight or flight stress response when they're still in the locker room or the night before when they're just thinking about their competition. Sometimes it's the whole week before. Every night they're having trouble getting to sleep because they're nervous about their weekend tournament or some big game that's coming up. So we trigger this and we bring all this fat here, but we're not running and we're not fighting. So what does that fat do? Well, it stays in our torso area. And I have this very crazy little picture of this man who's really messed up. And all this blue in the center of his body is representing all this fat and glucose coming here and staying in the torso area. So that's what stress fat is. It builds in the torso area right under our breasts, and it builds in this area and in our arteries as well. There's a wonderful National Geographic that was done in 2010 on stress, the silent killer. I need to put it back up on my website. It was on a former website of mine, and I need to get that back up there because it's a fabulous 1 hour that has 4 studies revealed in it that basically show everything that I'm sharing here tonight in some really graphic ways, showing how a particular tribe of baboons out in the wild were watched for 20 years and the only ones who showed these kinds of stress effects like fat and glucose in the torso area and stress fat in the arteries and other effects were those that were under stress because they all ate the same diet and they all lived in the same environment. But particularly males, the males in the middle, were very stressed out by the alpha males. And so those were the ones that went through all of this stress effect because they kept releasing these stress hormones over and over throughout their day. So we're doing it because we feel these certain emotions. Here's some things that happen. We'll kind of start head to toe. The face flushes. I met a woman today who said, I have no idea why my face always turns so red when I'm embarrassed and ashamed, feeling ashamed. That's one of my A's. That will actually cause your face to flush because that's all that blood flow, wicking the fat and glucose from our brains and from our extremities. I was working with a volleyball athlete, and you could watch the stress response release in her, and her whole back of her legs would turn bright red from the release of that blood flow going up. I've seen it in arms too, on people too. So that's some people's necks turn red too. So that's what's going on there. That massive blood flow is what's changing the color of our face. And then some people look really pale sometimes after the flow has gone. Looks like they're going to faint. Hearing and eyesight change pretty radically, and I watch this in athletes particularly. I have some athletes who say to me, I get back to the bench and I can't even hear what the coach is saying. They're talking right to me, and it's like all muffled. I can't really hear it. And what's going on there is our hearing does shift. We're not focusing anymore on hearing things a certain way. I'm not really sure why this happens. But when I work with athletes to stay in the zone and not trigger too much adrenaline, they're able to go back to the bench, hear their instructions, and perform at such a higher level mentally because they're now present. They're not in fight or flight. The eyesight changes pretty dramatically too. We're going to get a broad peripheral vision to see where this attack is coming from, but the focused vision that we're used to goes right out the window. You can really see this come into play in ball sports, or even in hockey. You'll see it too. There'll be your missed passes, or you'll miss the goal. You think your stick is right on the puck and it's not. Um, I see this so much in baseball, even all the way to the college level. And I was just at a pro game the other day and saw some of it too. You think you're seeing the ball come right to you, but your vision has changed. It's not quite the same as it was. And so you miss the ball. And then you pat around for the ball and fumble with it. Well, two things are going on there. If you look at the last thing on my list here, reflex is hyper. So not only has the eyesight changed, but our reflexes are now hypering. So we pass over the ball with our hand and then over the ball again. It's usually one or two passes before finally you get your hand on the ball once those reflexes have hypered. And that reflex hypering causes us to feel a bit uncoordinated. And I've seen this happen so many times. An athlete's all ready to go, but then for some reason, they will trigger fight or flight. And now they're everything they do is aggrandized. If a volleyball player, they go to serve the ball and it goes out of bounds. Same thing with basketball, they overshoot. Hockey, they overshoot. Baseball, they overthrow. They'll go right over the heads of the first baseman. So it's very interesting to watch how much an athlete changes when they go into fight or flight. Going back to the eyes here, the tear ducts actually shut down. So some people have a dry eye problem, and it's not, it could be really a stress problem, not an ophthalmological problem, but the fact that every time you release all that adrenaline, your tear ducts are going to shut down. Saliva ducts also shut down, which is why we get that cottony mouth feeling. And no matter how much water you drink, it still doesn't feel like your mouth is moist. That's because those saliva ducts have shut down. And the saliva ducts are attached to our entire digestive system. Every time we release these hormones, our digestive system is going to slow down or even stop because metabolizing food takes so much energy. And in this particular case, if our body feels it's under attack, we want all the energy to fight or run away. I had one client who he was a runner and had a serious digestive problem. And after just one session with me at our second meeting, he said to me, I have to tell you that I have this really serious problem and it's all gone now, thanks to using my tool belt and using my tools. That was amazing for him. This digestive problem was really serious for his body and his body's ability to utilize his food properly. Reproductive system slows down or stops as well, which is not a method of birth control, by the way, but it does explain why some people who have trouble conceiving suddenly adopt a child and then they're able to conceive. The stress is off. Their bodies are able to function better. So the reproductive system is seriously compromised by these hormones. The next one's kind of funny, but boy, if I go to a road race, I love to watch people going in and out of the restroom. I was at a road race a couple of years ago and I saw the same woman go in and out 4 times before her race in an hour's period. Now, what's going on there is she's so anxious for her race that her bladder and sphincter muscles are contracting and relaxing. They're changing, and the catecholamine or adrenaline hormones lodge into those muscle fibers and cause a lot of activity. So it feels like you have to go. Plus, you've created a whole lot of processes going on in your body, and you're building up more urine. It's usually pretty pale, too, when you are in fight or flight and you have this experience with your bladder. Um, so that can be very disconcerting as an athlete. I had one athlete who would use a restroom and go out and do the warm up on the court and feel like she had to go right back in. And it's not just women, it's boys as well. I joke that the porta potties out of the baseball fields are pretty loaded throughout the game. So that's what's going on there. Very uncomfortable feeling, and it's wonderful when we can free up and not feel like we're going to have a problem there. Legs and arms shaking. If you think about it, we've pulled fat and glucose out of all these cells, including our neurons, and we've dehydrated those muscles. Plus, we've pulled water out of those cells. At the same time, these muscles are going to get a huge um, amount of blood going out into them so they can do this violent action. So they're really transforming quite a bit, and it can cause a lot of shakiness. So I watch people, when they hold out their hand, is their hand shaking? Ball players, I'll see their knees shaking just a little bit, that little tremoring feeling. And that's a sign to me that we have some more work to do so that we're not in fight or flight. Many people know about adrenaline and they also know about this drug cortisol, but what they don't know is that these hormones, the stress hormones, release in two floods. The first flood was the catecholamines or the adrenaline, and now the second flood of hormones. This hormone flood releases when the body senses that the threat is gone. And when that happens, the cortex of the adrenal glands. So this is like the skin of the adrenal gland. So it's the same gland, but a different part of it creates a completely different compound. They're called glucocorticoids. Gluco meaning sugar, and then the corticoids, cortisol. So I'll refer to it as glucose and cortisol. So these are going to go right out into the bloodstream again. And the purpose is great when you think about what we've just done to all of our neurons in our brain and all these cells in our arms and legs. This glucocortisol, the glucose and the cortisol is going to go out and get the salt, sugar, and water content of all of those cells back to normal so that fat can transport in and out of the cell again. So basically, we're repowering our bodies back up, which is just amazing to me that our bodies can do that. However, when we throw a whole bunch of glucocorticoids into our bloodstream, it can cause a lot of havoc in our bodies. These things I'm going to share right here are so critical for athletes. First, sugar imbalance. We just threw a whole bunch of glucose into our blood system. It really messes with our insulin, it messes up our pancreas, and it can cause hyperglycemia and diabetes too. So it's not something that we want, especially how often we do it. Many people trigger many times a day, and they're throwing so much sugar into their bloodstream. Cortisol, I'm going to talk about two psychological things it does. I actually have a whole session in my course just about the mind and helping the mind move out of negativity and into positivity for better performance. But here I'm going to talk about two things that cortisol does just as a drug in your body. When cortisol hits your brain, it can actually create feelings of anxiety in you. Well, anxiety is one of those big A's that I have. I don't like anxiety. It's something that triggers the fight or flight stress response. And the drug cortisol can cause that in us naturally. Cortisol is also our wake up drug. Naturally, our bodies release cortisol a few hours before we're going to rise every morning. And that's a signal to the body to wake up. However, when we trigger it at other times during our day and release this big flood of cortisol, it can cause us to feel sleeplessness when it's time to go to sleep. So a lot of clients come to me because of insomnia, and it's been amazing to watch them work through stopping the release of these hormones so that they can sleep better at night and actually get a real night of rest. But here's some physical things that happen. Thyroid gland. The thyroid gland is our body regulator. It handles metabolism. And every time we release these glucocorticoids, the thyroid gland is going to suppress. This can cause our metabolism to go down and again, build more stress fat. And cortisol alone, when it enters fat cells, increases fat cells. So it's a triple whammy. It's a triple play, if you will, on that stress fat. You got the adrenaline pulling the fat and glucose to the center. You've got cortisol pumping up the fat cells, and you've suppressed your thyroid gland. So that's why fat can build, even though you may be an amazing runner. In fact, a woman just asked me yesterday. She said, you hear about these marathoners having heart attacks. Shouldn't their hearts be amazing? One thing that's happening is if they're triggering fight or flight stress hormones in their daily workouts by releasing too much adrenaline, going a little over the top in their workouts, they're going to create a flood of glucocorticoids as well. And this is going to cause all of these problems in the human body. So it's really important to stay in that upper athletic heart rate without triggering higher into fight or flight. So cortisol, thyroid gland suppressed, immune system. This is so huge for athletes. The immune for all people really. And this is one of my number one reasons to stay pressure free all day. Immune system is suppressed. And one study that I read, both immune system and inflammatory response are suppressed up to 40% just by feeling a disagreement with another person. Just being in disagreement, you don't even have to argue, but just having a disagreement with another person can trigger fight or flight stress response to the point where your immune system is compromised up to 40%. So I'm digging into more and more research on this because the numbers are all over the map. Regardless, 40%, this one's proven it's just too high for me. Why cut off your immune system almost in half for a door that doesn't work right? Or because my son didn't do the vacuuming today? Or all these other little tiny things. Some idiot cuts me off on the highway. Doesn't hurt me. He's just cutting a little close. Certainly no reason for me to trigger fight or flight. So immune system and inflammatory response. Inflammatory response, of course, is when you get a cut or you're hurt. It's that amazing response in our bodies to get all the healing starting to happen. So as athletes, every time we work out, we're tearing muscle fibers so that they can get bigger and stronger. So we want the immune system and the inflammatory response to be 100%, to be working marvelously for us. But when we trigger fight or flight, we have seriously compromised it. So as a result, our muscles actually get smaller from cortisol release and our bones get smaller. So that can lead to osteoporosis, which is a very serious disease, particularly for women more so than men. Here are some more effects from all of this release of stress hormones, both the adrenaline rush and the glucocorticoids. You create a really acidic body, and bacterias and cancers thrive in an acidic body. So every time you release the stress hormones, no matter what you've eaten, maybe you eat a really beautiful alkaline diet, if you've triggered fight or flight, you've created an acidic body. And I run into people who are really amazing, working so hard with their workouts and eating so well, but they're triggering stress hormones throughout their entire day, very anxious about races and everything else. And they're creating such an acidic body that their bodies are breaking down instead of building. So that's why ulcers, by the way, ulcers are caused by a bacteria, and that bacteria thrives when we've released fight or flight, which is why ulcers have been linked to stress for a long time. Even though there's a little period of time when they said, no, stress doesn't cause it, a bacteria does. But what the stress does is cause the bacteria to be able to grow. Eczema and psoriasis, osteoporosis, inflammation, so arthritis, inflammatory diseases like lupus also are exacerbated by stress. Diabetes, hyperglycemia, immune disorders, just about every disease is either caused directly by stress or exacerbated by stress. So one of the purposes in sharing all of this with you is for you to really come up with some compelling reasons why you want to stop triggering these stress hormones. So the ones I just shared with you here were health reasons, but you could easily see how they're starting to play a role in your performance as an athlete. There are also relationship reasons. When you're an athlete, you have so many different relationships. If you're on a team, you have relationships with your teammates. If you work out, if a workout buddy or someone you're working out with, you have relationships with them, your coach, anybody that's in your life. Maybe you have a sports medicine doctor you work with. You have so many different relationships, plus your family and the people that you live with. It's amazing to watch how pressure-free living helps relationships. When we're in that fight or flight mode, we're apt to say things and do things that we really don't mean. And I'm sure you can think to a moment where you had a coach who lost it in anger. There have been two really high profile cases in the past 3 years. A couple of years ago, a basketball coach at, I think it was in Pennsylvania at a Catholic university. I think it was Holy Catholic University. Kicked and punched a student. It was all videotaped because every practice is videotaped. And of course, was fired and everything. And we just had that happen at Rutgers. Pushed and kicked a student. And of course, afterwards, they say, I don't know what I was thinking. Well, when we release these stress hormones, our hippocampus in the back of our head, our thinking and learning spot, it shuts down somewhat. And we are not thinking very well. Plus, our decision making area in the prefrontal cortex, that also shuts down. So sometimes we make decisions that aren't the best for us in social situations because we feel threatened, even if it's just a tiny thing like the boss walking down the hall toward us. I have one client, all he has to do is see a certain caller ID on the phone, and he goes into fight or flight. So relationships can really improve when you're no longer triggering all those hormones. And then performance, to have our muscles work better for us. I've had so many athletes say to me, I do my workout and I get so much more bang for the buck now because I'm not triggering all of these stress hormones. Plus, you're getting rid of some of that anxiety and that anger and embarrassment, those emotions that take you out of your game. So hopefully you have some compelling reasons in those three areas why you would want to make a change in your life and consider some of my tools in my system. But this is a real kicker. For males, this is the last thing on my slide here. It takes up to 9 hours for these hormones to dissipate out of your cells. For females, it takes up to 24 hours. Well, 24 hours is just way too long. It's way, way, way too long. When I learned that fact, I said, okay, I haven't been clean since age 10 or so. And I've never taken the puff of a cigarette trying to keep my body fairly clean and healthy, not to mention all the workouts and everything else I've done for it all these years. But I've been triggering stress hormones at least once a day since I was 10 until 2010 when I created Pressure Free Living. And within a few short weeks, my body radically changed thanks to using my method. So having that compelling reason, the one for me is when I start to feel one of those emotions and start to trigger fight or flight. By the way, for me, it's technology. If I push a button, whether it's on my computer or on a remote or on any sort of technological item, and it doesn't work right, look out because I'm about ready to go right down the stress hormone highway. And everyone in my family will try to protect me because they don't want to see me trigger fight or flight. In fact, all of us here in our home help each other stay pressure free because we love each other and we want each other to be healthy and happy and have a great day. And it's a little self serving too because if someone in the house triggers, then they're not going to be very much fun to be around. This male female difference too. In my research, the one thing I found that explained it was that if we go back many millennia, most of the time in most societies, the males were on the outside fighting, and the women and the children were huddling together, fearful for 24 hours, I guess. And the male bodies had to recover faster after triggering these hormones in order to fight again fresh. So that's the only explanation I've been able to find for this 9 hour, 24-hour difference. But another thing it does explain is why when a man and a woman or male and female have an argument, a few hours later, the male's getting better about it, but the woman is not at all. In fact, the next morning, she's still mad. And she's probably triggered again because she can't understand why he doesn't care about this anymore. Because he's moved out of it. He's biologically moved out of it. And with her, these hormones are still in her cells. They are still affecting her and they're affecting her judgment. So that's really amazing, compelling reason to just say no to these nasty hormones. So in 2010, I thought, okay, I learned this next little fact that from a resting heart rate, assuming it's not too hot out, but from most people's resting heart rates, it takes an average of 10 seconds before the heart rate can trigger up above the athletic heart rate to release this flood of hormones. So I thought, okay, 10 seconds is a pretty long time. For years, I've been teaching athletes and violin students these mental toughness techniques to keep them calm right before their performances. What if we use these mental toughness techniques all day to prevent the release of these hormones in any situation so that by the time we get to our race or our performance, our bodies and our minds are working optimally for us, for all of us. And that's exactly what I came up with. This amazing set of tools. Some are mind tools and some are more kinesthetic or body tools to stop the release of the hormones. So we're literally stopping stress at its source. We're not flooding our bodies with these nasty hormones anymore. So that was my incredible solution I came up with in 2010, and that I just started sharing it right away. The very week that I figured this all out, I had two paying clients and a baseball team that wanted to work with me. One of the clients was the coach of the baseball team. He was a broker, and he said, "I need you, and I want to pay for your course. I want to take it now." I said, "Well, it's not really a course yet." He goes, "I don't care what it is. I want it now." And my department chair at the college where I teach, she was my second client. And I just kind of, in passing, told her what I was up to. And she said, "Well, I want to take your course and I want to start tomorrow." And she wrote me a check. She was just so excited to think that there was something here that could help her with stress. Um, they were my first two clients, and since then I've worked with over 1,000 people. And tonight, what I want to share with you is a really powerful first tool. Um, this first tool is mostly kinesthetic, uses two of my tools out of my set of basic 9, the smile and posture. But I combine them together because to break us of habits, sometimes we have to do something a little out there. And so what I created here is something I call my celebration Ferris wheel, or celebration 3-point shot. So you can decide how you'd like to do it. But the purpose of it is to make a rather gross motor movement so that you're literally saying no to this stress. You're stopping it. So whenever we start to feel one of those 4 A's working in us, what I want you to do is pretend you're pushing a Ferris wheel right in front of your face. It's not very big. You can get your hands on a car and you're just going to give it a push. And the Ferris wheel is a metaphor for the energy of your life. When you give that a push and you stop triggering fight or flight, your energy is going to increase. So that's the metaphor for this spinning wheel. The other thing I want you to do is celebrate, even if you didn't catch it in time and you feel your face turn red or your palms get sweaty, um, you feel like you didn't catch it in time. I still want you to celebrate because you had awareness that something triggered you. And then this is the crux of my program, is that you become aware of the little things that are causing you to trigger these stress hormones. Since it's a silly thing to do, hopefully you'll smile. And you're celebrating too. We need to celebrate more in North America. We don't smile enough up here. So I really encourage people to push that Ferris wheel, and it's pretty funny. So give yourself a little smile. Smile is one of my most quick and fun tools to use, and very effective. When the corners of our mouth go up, we keep the release of dopamine flowing in our brains. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that shuts off when we release the stress hormones. Dopamine is also known as the pleasure drug, and it gets a little bit of a bad rap because it is linked to addiction. However, dopamine is what keeps our whole cortex firing. So, our hippocampus, our ability to think and remember, happens because of this neurotransmitter. When we shut it off, then we don't feel so good. We're not happy. We're apt to forget things. We're in a different mode. So, simply by smiling, you help keep the dopamine flowing, which signals to the brain there's no way you're under attack right now. There's no reason to trigger fight or flight. When you push up too, the second thing it does is it lifts your posture. So try it right now. Just pretend you're pushing up with both hands up into the sky. And notice how your posture lifts up. Posture is a fabulous stress tool. By moving into a more confident posture, it sends a signal to your brain that there's no way you're under attack right now. This is not a threatening situation because you've moved into a confident posture. And your brain, when the body does that, assumes that you're now confident, whether you are or not. So it's a physiological tool that helps the brain keep you under control and not release these terrible stress hormones. If you don't like the Ferris wheel, I had a friend out in Colorado. She doesn't like the Ferris wheel, so she decided to use a 3-point shot. So when I was coaching her, she goes, "Can I shoot a 3-point shot?" And it goes swoosh through the net. And I'm like, "Sure." So it's the same kind of thing where you're lifting both arms up and you're moving your posture up and you're definitely smiling because that is a swoosh of a shot. And it was fun. Last fall, I had several female clients, high school clients, and a junior high client too, um, that were using the 3-point shot. And when they got to their basketball season, they played so well and they hit more 3-point shots. So it's kind of a wonderful built-in tool for them for their sport as well. So this is my first tool. My gift for you tonight is to start playing with this tool a little bit. And yeah, I used the word play because with all of my tools, I call them play tools because if we try too hard, then we build anxiety, and anxiety doesn't get us anywhere. Plus, when people will say to me, "Well, I'll try to do this," or many times my clients will say, "I can't do this," or "I don't feel I can." And there's a lot of anxiety and problems, and I say, "Can we move to the possibility of maybe? If we can think maybe this might work and give it a little bit of effort, let's see what happens." So we're playing here. We're pushing this Ferris wheel. We're shooting this 3-point shot. And this tool belt, I created it. It's really imaginary, but I imagine strapping this tool belt right around my waist and loading it up with all these different tools for the different situations I encounter in my day. So right now you can use 3 different tools. You can just simply smile or move your posture up, or you can go full blown, the full Monty, push that Ferris wheel, or shoot that 3-point shot. That's going to start this real interrupt of some of your patterns and habits that you have. All of us have many habits, some for decades, some only for a few years, but I've found that it doesn't matter how old you are. I've worked with people as old as 90, and they have been able to gain benefit from pressure-free tools. Um, so it's really for everyone. My clients range from age 12 to 90, and it's really pretty amazing to watch the transformation in people when they start playing around and finding the right tools that work for them. People who are more cerebral, the mind session is really great because there we're breaking some mental patterns that are dragging us down. And I can't predict. I had a very young client, only 12. She's my most sophisticated client. All of her tools are very sophisticated and tend to be all the mental tools, more so than the kinesthetic or body tools. So I don't predict anymore. I lay all the tools out there for people, um, so we can discover which ones work best for each particular individual. I also work with groups too of any size and families. Here's a little bit of information about me, and you can take a look at my website. It's www.pressure-free.com. And I coach individuals and groups of any size in person by Skype. And now I'm actually doing coaching sessions just like I'm doing here with webinar, but I unmute the person that I'm working with, of course, and we interact and put up our webcams as well, and do our session that way. So it's combining slides, audio, and video. I'm finding that to be extremely effective for people who are interested in that. I give retreats at a beautiful manor just north of Battle Creek called Greencrest Manor. I do VIP packages designed just for you if you want me to work with you. Um, Come to your workplace, come to your home, see what's really going on, and help you really get to solution so that you can move out of stress. So that is my webinar for this evening for you, for improving athletic performance. Um, I have athletes that write to me the most personal and incredible things, for how pressure-free living has made a difference in their life, not just athletically, but academically, with their families, with relationships of all sorts, and even with decisions about their careers. I've had many people of all ages make some career decisions that have been interesting now that they're pressure free and can get to solution so much faster instead of feeling all muddled and not sure what to do. So I'm going to close off this recording and then open up my webcam. So let's see here.